talking again about this is like the second found footage movie we did.
I was thinking that earlier.
Sort of a trend. I kind of like them. I'm a little bit of a sucker for those. But for this week, we decided to watch Hell House LLC from 2016, directed by Stephen Cognetti.
Mm-hmm.
This is really all he's done. He did these three. Definitely an indie-style movie. This was done, obviously, low budget. This was not really released in theaters. It was YouTube, Amazon, Vudu, iTunes, stuff like that. It wasn't theatrically released at all. This was definitely, like we said, found footage style. So do you want to kind of go into just the basis of what this movie was?
Yeah, so essentially, after losing their residency in a previous Queen's haunt that they created, Alex, his girlfriend Sarah, and their friends Mac, Tony, and Paul purchase an abandoned hotel in Abaddon, New York, and turn it into their next big haunted attraction, Hell House.
Purchased. There's a couple of these movies, and they kind of dive into that in a little bit. So, on the Shudder Skull rating, this was a 4 out of 5. So, got some pretty good reviews. Good. This, I think I've seen bits and pieces of this in the past, but I never actually sat down and watched the whole thing. So it was fun. Rotten Tomatoes, this actually did pretty good. 75 for the critics and 72 for the audience. So it was pretty well received. So let's get into the good. The good for me. I enjoyed the setting. I think we talked about this before with Deadstream, that those single setting movies, if they're done correctly, it works. You know, they made a reason as to why it was just in this one specific thing, and I always give a lot of kudos to them for making such a small scale thing work, because for that you have to have story, you have to have stuff going on. A single setting can get very boring very quickly, and thankfully for me that really wasn't the case. I did like this take on found footage. It definitely became a trend, a resurgence almost, with Paranormal Activity and Quarantine and Cloverfield, and it, definitely kick-started back in with Blair Witch in 99, and it kind of faded away, and then it sort of came back when those happened, and then you get a lot of these indie movies that put their spin on it because it's easier, right? It's cheaper. Yep. You don't have to worry about settings. You don't have to worry about proper camera techniques. Well, you still do, but it sort of gets washed over a little bit, being like, oh, well, it was, Johnny whoever behind the camera just kind of running and gunning. So for me, their take on the found footage worked. It wasn't just another, I don't know. It was just, the setting, it made sense in the storyline as to why they were filming. It wasn't, I love Paranormal Activity, but it was like, oh, we're just going to set a camera up in the house because we think it's haunted. It was like
another cliche found footage. I feel like this actually had a story behind it versus just, oh, we're going to set the camera up in this house and hopefully we find something.
Yeah, and they built it up into the story where it's like, oh, we're filming for next year. So we can see what worked, see what didn't work.
Look back at the footage.
Yeah, it made sense for them. And then I didn't think the acting was terrible.
No, that was one of the things I liked. I thought it was pretty good, honestly.
For those indies, it's, there's a big difference, obviously, when you're talking different movies, but for me, these smaller scale ones, I give them a little bit more leniency, and it didn't stick out to me as much. So what are some other good things that you were kind of impressed by?
Kind of going along with the setting too, I really like the whole premise of the film. The whole haunted attraction goes wrong. People, a little bit of spoilers, obviously, with what we do with these, but people come into the house, they don't come out, tragedy on the first night. Like that happens. I've always thought that's been kind of creepy, especially here since we don't really get as many local haunted attractions as we have now. Like back in the day there was more, but that's just always a creepy thing. You don't really get to experience that at these bigger ones because it has so much safety measures and line and all that kind of stuff, so you wouldn't really have to worry about something like this happening. But it is kind of creepy to think about, and I really think it kept that suspense through the whole movie, which is what I really appreciated from that as well. Like Nick said too, I really enjoyed the acting, honestly. For these characters, I didn't look too much into other roles they have done in other stuff maybe, but for me, first seeing them in this film, I thought it was pretty good. I thought the found footage aspect of it was pretty smooth compared to Deadstream. I think this found footage I appreciated more than I did that kind of aspect of the Twitch streaming kind of thing. I like this being more of, they have a story behind it, they want to get the footage for next year, just to prep themselves and kind of stuff like that. It just seemed more natural.
So let's get into the bad, I guess. I had a couple things. Nothing like super major.
Yeah.
Except this first one, which was actually kind of major. Was for me, the ending didn't really stick with me. It was sloppy. I think it just kind of... They had the idea. They had the beginning, the middle, and then the end was kind of an afterthought. It was sort of like...
They definitely set it up for the sequels, but...
Yeah. But it just fell flat a little bit. I could have done without that last little bit. You could have ended it on the night of the tragedy. Yeah. You could have skipped the whole... You
didn't need the extra where the interviewer and all that kind of stuff, how to go check it out, blah, 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 whatnot. I don't really think it needed that.
Fell a little flat. The back and forth of the interviews threw me a little bit. It just jumbled the timeline a little bit. It went from present day to the found footage, back to the present day to the found footage. And it was sort of just like an unnecessary commentary of modern day to what was happening in the past. And it was... That part took me out of it just a little bit. The film quality, back in 2016, you probably could have had some better cameras.
Right.
I get what they were looking for, but you can do a clean found footage movie. It doesn't necessarily have to be as choppy. I'm sure that's what they were going for, but as you can see, we are not too far, a few years removed, and we have some great DSLRs, so you would assume that they would as well. For me, the characters were a little unrecognizable. I kept confusing the characters.
It was so hard to keep up with who was with who, because I feel like they never directly talked to someone by their name, but we were watching it with the closed captions so you could see who was talking at some points with it. But there was 5 of them, and I just feel like it was really, other than Sarah, she was the only girl, and Alex, which was the main one who started everything. I feel like it was kind of hard to keep up with who was who.
Yeah, I couldn't, for the life of me, I couldn't tell you their names. Still, after watching the entire movie, I know Alex and Sarah because you just mentioned them. Other than that, they don't stick with me. And then the other thing, I didn't even write this down, but now thinking about it, I was just curious, like, they just have a lot of money at their disposal. They must be pretty successful because they just, like, kind of come in, run electrician through this whole haunted house. They get this thing up and running in, like, 6 days, and they completely knock it out with props. And then it's, like, a line of, like, 30 people. And they're like...
Yeah.
It
said it took them a couple weeks in the film, but he was like, oh, this place is already dilapidated and creepy looking, we don't really have to add anything. But then later on when they actually opened it, I'm like, where the hell did they get all this stuff? Since they already lost their spot in Queens, I thought they went So essentially, a little bit of spoilers too, they went broke, and this is why they had to get this new place, and they couldn't have the one in Queens in the city anymore. But it's like, if they went broke, how do they still have all this stuff and, like, come back with it? But
who knows? Anything else for the bad for you?
The one thing that I didn't like, obviously I know it's a movie and it's not going to be that practical, but I like something being practical. So the interview sequences that they were doing with Sarah, you come to find out that she's actually dead. So I was thinking of it, so I was like, everyone can see her, she's a ghost, she can leave whenever she wants, she can come back whenever she wants, and she can do an interview and all this kind of stuff. It just wasn't really that practical for me. It was a nice little plot twist, but it didn't really make sense.
See, for me, that wasn't even a twist. I knew it from the beginning. Because she says, I'm in a better place now. Oh, I was like, okay, she's not, she's dead. Like, that was just, and you're supposed to be in your mindset, but for me, with that line, like, I get that they were trying to be cheeky and, like, throw something out there, but for me, I was like, oh, she's dead. Yeah, 'cause the way she's acting is already, like, throwing me off, and it's supposed to put you a little on ease, but the line of, I'm in a better place now, it's like, oh, she's dead. This is...
And they said, too, that there was only one survivor. And I'm like, no one survived. What are they even talking about?
Yeah.
Like, no one survived.
It was a little choppy.
It was a little confusing.
Let's get into the top moment. What stuck out to you as your top moment from this?
Honestly, there was a couple top moments, I would have to say. So the certain scene, it wasn't even like the climax of the film or anything, but there were certain scenes where they had different mannequin clowns set up in the house, in different parts of the house and stuff like that. And someone or something was going around moving these clowns, turning their heads, really just kind of driving everyone crazy in the house because they all thought they were going, or were they, exactly, yeah. I really like that. There was a couple good little jump scares and stuff like that, and kind of those little background shots that you really have to pay attention to, or else you won't see something that's going on in the background. I like that kind of stuff. Also, the final sequence of the film when Sarah when the tragedy happens in the haunted house, and Sarah and Paul meet back up with each other, and she's like, oh my god, we gotta get out of here, like, let's go. And then, I don't want to spoil the rest of it because I might use that for my best kill as well, but there's a scene that I really like for the whole movie that probably did it for me at the end, so.
Yeah. I think the best moment for me, it was that first, like, it was kind of the point of no return, where we started to see that things were really going weird, and I forget the camera guy's name, but he was walking down, calling for
Mac.
Alex or whatever, Mac, sure, calling for them. He goes and he sees the clown standing at the top of the stairs, and then it turns to him, and he's freaking out. He thinks it's one of the other guys. In a continuous cut, runs back to the other room where both the guys are, and he's like, freaking out, what are you doing, blah, blah, blah.
Those were those little parts that I really liked.
And he runs back down the hallway, and now the clown is gone. I was like, okay, stuff is starting to kind of to move here. So you mentioned it, best kill. I didn't really put anything for, because there was a lot of deaths, but I don't remember, like, kills. Like, at the end, it was sort of this big calamity, and, like, everyone died then. But, like, I couldn't think of any.
Essential kill is what it was at the end of the movie when Paul finds Sarah and he ends up bashing her head in and killing her, and then he slits his own throat and kills himself.
Okay, sure, use that for me.
Which that was that
got lost in the commotion.
And then the other one that was pretty good is when I think it was Sarah was going up to the attic looking for Alex, or it was Mac. Like I said, it was really hard to keep track of these characters. I think they could have done with like 3 of them, but 5 of them was a lot. And they found Alex hanging in the attic, but that wasn't really a kill because you don't really know who did it. Yeah, exactly.
Sure. All right, so let's get into our own ratings, fear and beer ratings. So fear, how scary was this movie? And beer, how much did you enjoy this movie? So what was your fear rating for this on a scale of 1 to 5?
I gave this one a 3, actually.
3? Okay.
I thought it was pretty good. I feel like it did it enough for me. The beginning was kind of slow, but I feel like once we started getting into the nitty-gritty of it, I really liked it. And like I said before, I really liked the whole premise of it. Haunted attraction goes wrong. There's another film that I really like, The House is October Built. Same kind of premise. Love that one too. So
yeah, I'll give it like a 2.5 because
that's a good
it did take a little while to get going.
Yeah.
It was a lot of just explaining and getting us into the setting and setting up the house before stuff started. You knew stuff was going to go wrong. You just didn't know when. It took a little bit to get there. That's when the fear and the unease started to kind of kick in for me. But for your beer, where'd you put this? Your beer rating?
I also gave this a 3.
Okay, 3.
Double 3s on this one.
Yeah, I'll match your 3. I enjoyed it. It was a fun watch. I do enjoy those found footage movies. I think it's easy for a found footage movie to be bad. So like an average found footage movie for me is like a little bit like higher. I just feel like I have that in me because it takes a lot to make a found footage movie excel. So that's what we got for this week on our Shudder Sundays. Hell House LLC. You can check it now. It's streaming on Shudder. But until next time, this is Nick.
This is Jamie.
Happy haunts.